We make wasted potential a crime. I watched Fake Blood, a found footage movie found for free on Tubi, and Fake Blood is about two filmmakers doing a documentary about movie violence. Right off the bat, there's some weird audio mixing. It gets to be too loud. The music kind of drowns out their voice at the start. But these filmmakers have made films before, low-budget horror movies, and they get a little freaked out when someone sends them a video of themselves picking out potential weapons for a body that they would dismember based on a similar scene in one of their own movies where the characters are shopping for things to dismember a body with. So for some reason, I can't understand it, but that upsets them and makes them decide to make a documentary about movie violence. So they ask questions about the responsibility of filmmakers. They bring up how in The Dark Knight there was no blood. Is it the responsibility of filmmakers to show the realism of violence when it's used and not make it cartoonish? That sort of a thing. And there's a lot of interesting things to be said here. They go out and they try guns for the first time, and then they start getting a little deeper because the realism versus the lack of realism is what they're focused on. So they interview someone who's seen killings before, who was involved in a gang. They also interview the man whose sister got killed by the person who was with the gang member that they met with previously. Seems like a really bad idea, right? And it is a bad idea. Once they do those interviews, things go south. And I will say this movie was a disappointment to me. I feel like it was a good mockumentary documentary, but there wasn't really, okay, let me put it this way, right? It starts out kind of like a documentary, like I said, but it doesn't end like a documentary, it just stops. So what ends up happening, and I'll explain it, if you want spoilers, spoilers ahead. What ends up happening is that these guys, one of their rooms gets broken into. There's one of the filmmakers who's really into getting involved in the real life aspects of this and researching it, and the other one wants out. The other one doesn't want to keep doing this stuff. The one doing all of this gets his room broken into, likely because they had requested the court documents for the trial that the guy who witnessed killings that they interviewed was involved in. And the guy on the stand there says it wasn't him that did it, but it was actually the guy who says that he didn't do it, the one that they interviewed. So the one they interviewed turns out to be a murderer, and they assume that he's the one who tossed the house. And so for a month, they have to go live under police protection. And things get to a boiling point. They don't really talk to each other. After about a month, there's no sign of the guy. So they have to move back to their houses. The police say, no, we've staked him out. There's nothing of him here. He's not here. About a week later, they get called to the police station because there's a dead body found. And the dead body is the brother of the girl who was killed, the one that they interviewed. And on his body was the business card of one of these two men who was making the documentary. And I think the reason that this happens in the overall story of the movie is what violence are filmmakers responsible for, right? And I think that's an interesting question and an interesting way to do it, but the movie just kind of ends on that. The two of them aren't talking anymore after this. The guy is upset, and then the movie ends. The problem here is, this movie started as a documentary. It doesn't end as a documentary. It poses a lot of interesting questions, but there's never an answer to the questions. Which is, okay, with something like this, it's okay not to have an answer to the questions, but it's a big not answer. I don't know how else to put it. It's very, I don't know. It's disappointing, is how I would put it. I would have liked to see an ending that at the very least left a conclusion, like a documentary, so that it felt like we were watching an actual documentary the entire time. By just ending abruptly like the movie does, it kills the illusion of the documentary. All that being said, I ended up giving this movie a 2.5 out of 5. Fake Blood was good for a lot of the movie. It really was. They did a good job with it. I just wish that it had been more complete in the end. I think I would score it higher for sure. I won't be watching it again. I might have watched it again if it had a more satisfying conclusion. It doesn't need to have an ending, it just needs to conclude, like it started.